Many thanks to the producers who make this mess possible. Baldur's Gate 3 is a terrible game, which sure is awkward because I can't seem to stop playing it. At its best, it feels like the Dungeons & Dragons game the fans have been waiting years for. At worst, it feels like the unholy love child of the worst parts of XCOM and Divinity Original Sin 2. God help my Twitch chat, who has spent the last 2 weeks watching me painfully attempt to like this game. Pushing past the mediocre combat, the terrible camera, and of course the woke nonsense straight from the bowels of Tumblr, to appreciate the genuine, rough gem, the one-of-a-kind experience that is buried beneath it all. This is a very difficult game to talk about, but today we're going to give it the old college try. Except for the woke nonsense, that's going to be its own video. We're going to try to make as much of the story as I can, along with the mechanics stuff, its own politics-free video, so don't worry about that here. My name is Richard, and I am so glad that you could be here today. Baldur's Gate 3 is a Lovecraftian horror game. You begin your journey on a ship piloted by squids, before being chased down by dragons with no sense of physics because Baldur's Gate 3 is a Game of Thrones game. Our captors outrun them by ducking through the back alleyways of hell where demons attempt to steal our hubcaps, because Baldur's Gate 3 is a Christian allegory. And we aren't even through the first cutscene yet. Then after somehow surviving the crash, we are tasked with saving a group of helpless civilians from invading goblins, because Baldur's Gate 3 is a Dungeons & Dragons game. We save the civilians in the bright sunny coast and immediately travel to a haunted village full of mutated inhabitants and some of the most grotesque body horror I have genuinely ever seen in a video game, because Baldur's Gate 3 is a Resident Evil game. Before finishing that up, killing a god and fighting a goddamn JRPG villain, because Baldur's Gate 3 is a Final Fantasy game. It's all over the place. Just a little bit. Critiquing the story and mechanics of this game almost just isn't even worth doing individually, so instead we're going to throw most of the issues this game has into two main buckets. Issues with Baldur's Gate 3, and issues with Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition ported directly into Baldur's Gate 3. In the totally unique Baldur's Gate 3 category, we have one of the worst cameras I have ever seen, and the worst implementation of traps I have ever seen in a video game. Come on, just pick him up, just pick him up, just pick him up. Just, really? Really? And that's alongside a map that tries to make exploration more interesting by having a lot of verticality, but the verticality just ends up making the camera issues way worse. In short, if I had to take a guess as to why most players don't even finish Act 1, and I mean most players, the normies who buy this game because they get it recommended to them, yes, I do count them as players. If we're going to identify what is rotten inside of that first bucket, it's the fact that the physical act of playing this game, partaking in the world and moving about it and trying to even see it, is genuinely painful. Yes, the world opens up with tons of interesting characters and a lot of world to explore, but you won't want to go about actually seeing any of it or talking to any of them. I played through the initial starting area 4 different times, and the first 2 times, I didn't know you could meet Withers in the crypt or Aunt Ethel at the Druid camp. Didn't meet either of them, because I just didn't do all that much exploring. I went through the crypt both times, I went through the Druid camp both times, but I didn't do a lot of like nitpicky, go in, try to really absorb everything, you know, true perusing of these places either time, because the camera was genuinely painful to try to play with. And when you're fighting the camera and controls the whole time, it's a quick hop, skip, and a jump straight to mashing your way through all the NPC dialogue, and then you're just getting tired of the game, and it just spirals from there. And then at a certain point, players will just stop wanting to play, and they get that one series of bad rolls, or that one moment they die to some bullshit, and the autosave takes them like 2 hours back, and they're like, I'm done. In fact, if you didn't finish the game, that's probably exactly what happened to you. And to be clear, I am saying all this in hopes that Larian Studios can fix this in their next title. And I'll even give an example of one of the better areas. The Darklands in Act 2, despite the jarring shift in tone, is actually really interesting. Actually fixes a lot of these problems by dividing up a lot of the explorable area into a series of kind of floating islands with narrow bridges in between it, and it feels like one of the best areas to explore that you can actually just be in without feeling like you're fighting the game the whole time. Yeah, it feels the least realistic out of any of the settings. It doesn't feel like an actual world. It feels more like a game map, but I'd rather have something that feels more like a game map, but isn't like janky and broken and crappy to try and play. I hope that's logical. And what do you know, when I got to the last light inn, I actually did talk to all of the NPCs, including all of the animals, and not animals. But now's the part that may really get me into trouble, because now we need to dump out the bucket that is all the stuff from 5th edition they tried to port in that didn't work, or that already didn't work in 5th edition. Starting with the fact that the world and creature design is all over the place. There's an aesthetic issue of Wizards of the Coast's Lovecraftian knockoff creatures and Bible knockoff creatures and Homestuck knockoff creatures, just really not vibing together aesthetically. And I mean, I guess if you're a D&D player who's been playing for 20 years and you have seen all of these things gradually mixed together like a toad not noticing its water boiling, then yeah, you're probably going to get a kick out of it. And in fact, you'll probably really enjoy the high-quality cutscenes where all these different characters and creatures interact. But as someone who doesn't play D&D personally, it just felt aesthetically all over the place. But that still doesn't clash as badly as the tone, because my god. I know I said the woke stuff would be in the next video, and I did mean that, but we need to mention one thing real fast. The whole reason that Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has become so gay is the fact that they're trying to appeal specifically to the casual fantasy crowd that was brought in by, Critical Role and stuff like that. The people who never actually played a game or even watched an entire episode of Critical Role but like watching the clips. And since the game is, again, introducing these elements to appeal to that crowd, we have to note that the body horror stuff in this is way too graphic for that crowd. Hell, it was too graphic for me. I did not need that whole doctor section in Act 2. That could have been straight removed. I didn't even want to see that shit. Call me a bitch if you need to. I don't need that in this game. I don't need that in my fantasy game. If I want to play Resident Evil, I will play Resident Evil. And in all honesty, I actually think it may have been better that most players didn't finish this game, because I think if more casual players had made it to that point in the game, I think there actually would have been a lot of backlash to it, and Larian should really take that into account when making their next game. But of course, once all of that wraps up and we get past the body horror stuff, then we transition into being a goddamn JRPG and fighting gods with the power of friendship. My god, D&D is such a mess right now. But that's just the story. Let's talk about why the combat is terrible. I spent most of my game as a warlock. I get to have high charisma and fun spells, and at level 3, you can summon a magical weapon that literally uses your charisma for its chance to hit. It's great. In theory. Because with only a main action and a bonus action that you can do per turn, and with disengaging being such a pain in the ass in melee combat, I mean, you can only use what little turn you have to just spam your most effective spell or cantrip or ability. So my smooth-talking warlock did not dart around the battlefield mixing sword and spell. Hell no, you play as a warlock, your ass is going to be hiding in a corner spamming Eldritch Blast every single turn. And that is how you play. And outside of drinking a health potion once in a while, that is it. Again, with the movement being so restrictive and the enemies doing so much damage to you, even at higher levels, the default playstyle for every type of character will always just default to the most powerful attack possible. You're always going to spam Cloud of Daggers or Lightning Bolt or something on your first turn. You filter down into spamming your best attacks on the first turn as fast as possible, the same way that Skyrim filters you down into being a stealth archer. And I suppose like a proper D&D game, even in 5th edition, like a good DM would have more of a mix of like fodder enemies that you can just use your regular cantrips for, and the big boss enemies you got to use the good spells for. But especially with camp supplies being so common, you're just not going to do that here. And the fact that if you don't go to your camp enough, you actually will miss out on story events. So you're always going to have your best spells. You're basically required to, because it's the only way to heal, and you're going to have camp supplies all over the place. And what's really sad about it is that I love turn-based combat. I specifically love turn-based combat games. mostly because it simplifies things so the developers can focus on other things like the story and the setting and the characters. But in Baldur's Gate 3, you'll spend more time dashing and missing than you will actually fighting the enemy. You gotta love that XCOM 70% chance that hits 30% of the time. And I know that the hardcore D&D fans of the audience will tell me I just hate RNG, and I do. But there's no reason for enemies to be able to land critical hits on turn 1. So your party members lose most of their health before they even had the chance to swing. And that's especially considering that the AI will focus down your caster immediately, to the point that keeping Gale from becoming a pincushion on turn 1 is its own chore. And I think that they knew that. That's why they gave him such a ridiculously high constitution. And seriously, again, like, I know I'll get accused of just hating RNG, but I feel like any good DM would look at a scenario where most of your party, like 3/4 of your party, gets hypnotized on turn 1, or half your party dies in turn 1, would look at that and say, wow, you failed all of your rolls? That sucks. Let's not do that. Let's see what we can do. And having so many dice rolls in general, honestly, just gets tiresome. Like, if I spec my character for something specifically, I want to be able to consistently actually achieve that. But apparently that's an easy mode feature that you have to toggle. Oh goody, another chance for me to rant about realism in gaming. Tabletop gaming though, where the dice is king. Because realism to a D&D fan means you can't even so much as unlock your front door without a 1 in 20 chance of lacerating yourself with the key, or breaking a dagger in a hunk of cooked meat. Anyway, oh, this rant was way more than I thought it was going to be. That's probably enough for today. Do go down to the comments section, though. Let me know what things you guys want me to rant about next about this game, because, trust me, I can keep going. The woke nonsense, it's going to be its own video. Like I said, I really wanted to try to keep the political stuff in its own thing, and it makes the editing easier. But I do want you guys to have the nice, pure... I want those who don't want to hear me rant about that not have to, but if you do like what I have to say, when that video comes out, I do encourage you to at least give it a shot. It's, I think it's going to be a lot more interesting and have a lot more nuance than it may come across right now. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. Do hit the links in the description if you want to help me not be homeless. It's always appreciated, guys. And thank you so much. I will see you in the next one.